If your tomato plants always seem to sulk after planting out, sitting there for weeks, going a bit yellow at the bottom and refusing to grow, the problem may not start after planting. Very often it starts right in the planting hole. And this is where many gardeners accidentally make life harder for their tomatoes. Some people plant them into plain, tired soil and hope for the best. Others go the other way and put half the shed into the hole. A bit of compost, a handful of ash, a scoop of fertilizer, maybe something they saw online. And then the poor tomato plant is expected to cope with the lot. But a good start for tomatoes is usually much simpler than that. Today I want to show you what I would put in the planting hole when setting out tomatoes, how to do it properly, and one mistake people often make afterwards, even when they have planted them well. First, let's be sensible about this. I am not saying every garden, every allotment, and every greenhouse border needs exactly the same treatment. If your soil is already rich, well looked after, full of organic matter, and your tomatoes normally get away nicely, you may not need to add superphosphate at all. A planting hole feed is useful when the soil needs a bit of help at the start. It is not a magic ritual, so take this as a practical option for ordinary garden soil, the sort many of us have in the UK. Not perfect soil, not deep, rich, dream allotment soil, just normal ground that could do with a bit of support. When I am planting tomatoes into that sort of soil, I like to add 1 level tablespoon of plain superphosphate to the planting hole. And the important bit is not just what you add, it is how you add it. Because this is where people often get it wrong. They remember the tablespoon but forget the method. After planting out, a tomato plant does not need to make a huge amount of leafy growth straight away. First, it needs to settle in. It needs to get its roots into the soil, recover from being moved, and start growing steadily. That matters even more in the UK because spring can be unpredictable. The days may feel warm, but the soil can still be cold. Nights can drop suddenly, and tomatoes do not enjoy sitting in chilly, wet ground. If the roots get going well, the whole plant behaves better. It sulks less, yellows less, and starts into growth with more confidence. But if you simply throw granules into the hole and put the roots directly on top of them, you are not helping the plant. You are creating a problem. You do not want a layer of fertilizer sitting against the roots. The planting hole should not be a sandwich of fertilizer and root ball. The method works only when you add the fertilizer and mix it properly with the soil. That is the key point. Here is how I would do it. First, make a decent planting hole. Not a tiny hole just big enough to squeeze the plant in, but a proper hole for the root ball and the lower part of the plant. If your tomato seedling has become a bit leggy, and many do in our dull British springs, plan for that from the start. You may want to plant it a little deeper. Tomatoes can cope with that, and they will often root from the buried stem. Then add 1 level tablespoon of superphosphate. 1 tablespoon, not 3. Not a huge heaped spoon because you are feeling generous. Just 1 level tablespoon is enough. Now mix it into the soil at the bottom of the planting hole. Do not leave it sitting there in a clump. Do not let the root ball sit directly on top of it. Mix it through the soil so it is spread out. Only after that do you put the tomato plant in. If the plant is sturdy and compact, plant it normally. If it is a little stretched, you can plant it a bit deeper, but do not overcomplicate it. There is no need to twist the stem around in circles just because you saw someone do it in a video. Plant it calmly, according to the plant in front of you. Then backfill with soil, firm it gently so the roots have good contact, and water it in properly. Not a swamp, Not a muddy crater. Just a good, steady watering so the soil settles around the roots and there are no big air pockets. That is the whole method. Make the hole, add 1 level tablespoon. Mix it well with the soil. Plant the tomato, water it in, then let it settle. Now let's talk about what not to put in the planting hole, because many tomato problems come not from adding too little, but from adding too much. Do not throw everything in. Do not put in wood ash, strong fertilizer, eggshells, fresh manure, thick lumps of compost, and 3 other things you found online, all in the same planting hole. A tomato plant needs a good start. It does not need the entire potting shed buried under it. Do not feed by guesswork. The idea that more fertilizer means better tomatoes is one of the easiest ways to cause trouble. In the planting hole, accuracy is better than generosity. 1 measured spoon is a starting support. After that, the plant will depend on the whole bed or border, the weather, watering, feeding later in the season, and sensible care. Also, do not put fresh manure directly into a tomato planting hole. Well-rotted manure or compost can be useful in preparing a bed earlier on, but fresh manure right under a tomato plant is not a kind favor. It is a risk. And do not expect a good planting hole to rescue a poor plant. If your tomato seedling is already pale, weak, stretched like string, and barely alive, 1 spoonful in the hole will not turn it into a strong, healthy plant overnight. The planting hole helps a decent plant get started. It does not perform miracles. That is worth remembering, because otherwise people blame the fertilizer, the compost, the weather, and everything else, when the real problem was the plant was already struggling before it went in. Now let's get to the mistake people make after planting. This is the one I really want you to remember. They do the planting properly. They prepare the hole, mix in the feed, plant the tomato, water it in, and everything looks fine. Then they start interfering. They keep it in a closed greenhouse on a hot day with no ventilation. Or they water it again the next morning because they are worried. Or they start adding liquid feed, seaweed tonic, extra fertilizer, and all sorts of boosters before the plant has even had time to settle. That is when they undo their own good work. A planting hole is just the start. It is not the whole life of the plant. After planting, the tomato needs a bit of peace. Do not poke around the soil every day. Do not keep turning up with a watering can just because you feel you should be doing something. Do not expect it to shoot upwards the next morning. When a tomato is planted out, especially in our cooler conditions, it often takes a few days to adjust. That is normal. Your job is to give it a sensible start and then avoid making things worse. Keep it watered, but not waterlogged. Keep a greenhouse or polytunnel ventilated on warm days. Protect outdoor plants if there is still a risk of cold nights. And do not start feeding heavily before the roots are working properly. That is much better than fussing over it constantly. Think of it like this. You plant the tomato. You give it a good start. You water it in. Then you give it a few quiet days to settle. You do not drown it. You do not bake it in a closed greenhouse. You do not overfeed it. You do not panic because it has not doubled in size by tomorrow. That is when the planting hole really does its job. And one more thing, just so we do not go too far the other way. Do not turn superphosphate into a religion. If your soil is already good, alive, fertile, and well managed, and your tomatoes grow well without it, then you do not have to add it just because someone says so. Plenty of gardeners grow excellent tomatoes in good soil, in large containers, in grow bags, in greenhouse borders, or in raised beds without putting superphosphate into every hole. The point is not that tomatoes cannot grow without it. The point is that, on ordinary soil, a small, well-mixed phosphate feed at planting can help the roots get going more calmly. That is all. No magic, no secret trick, just a sensible start. And if your tomato plant does not leap into growth the day after planting, that does not automatically mean something is wrong. Do not rush to pour something else on it. Let it settle. Let the roots start working. Give it time. The real problem often begins when we try to rescue a plant that has not even had a chance to get going yet. So, in simple terms, here is the method. For ordinary garden soil, add 1 level tablespoon of superphosphate to the planting hole. Mix it well with the soil. Plant the tomato calmly, a little deeper if it is slightly leggy. Water it in properly. Then do not turn the next few days into a nervous performance. That is a good, clean start without unnecessary fuss. So if you want your tomatoes to stop sitting there looking miserable after planting, do not turn the planting hole into a jumble of every gardening tip you have ever heard. One clear, practical method often does more good than 5 random additions in the same hole. Tell me in the comments what you usually put in the planting hole when you plant tomatoes. Superphosphate, bone meal, wood ash, compost, or nothing at all. I would be interested to see what actually works for you in your garden, greenhouse, or allotment. And subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next practical gardening videos.